My name is Tessa Rowan. I'm 33 years old, and I work as a certified forensic accountant and healthcare compliance manager in Columbus, Ohio. For most of my adult life, those facts made me feel safe. Numbers left trails. Records could be checked. A signature meant something only when the person signing understood what it would be used to prove. Then, 18 years after I ran away from home because my older sister stabbed me and my parents said it was my fault, my family came back asking for that signature. The document was 12 pages long. My father had sent it after a string of calls and emails I had not answered quickly enough for him. Across the top were the words, "Sworn Declaration," and beneath them was a version of my life I had never lived. According to the declaration, I had served as an outside compliance consultant for Rowan Home Support, the in-home care company my parents ran with my sister Camille. It claimed I had reviewed billing corrections, approved certain account transfers, and advised management that the irregularities now being questioned were ordinary administrative mistakes. I had never worked 1 hour for that company. At the bottom of the last page, a blank line waited beneath my typed name: Tessa Rowan, Healthcare Compliance Manager. They had included my professional designation as if it belonged to them. My phone rang while I was still staring at it. My father's name filled the screen. I had deleted his number years earlier, but I had never forgotten it. I let the call go unanswered. A few seconds later, my mother called. Then an email notification appeared from Camille with a subject line that treated the entire thing like a deadline I had agreed to meet. I should have felt angry first. Instead, I felt 15, my shoulders locked. My breathing turned shallow. Beneath my blouse, the scar on the left side of my abdomen seemed to tighten, though I knew scars did not suddenly wake after 18 years. My body had simply recognized the demand before my mind was ready to name it. They wanted me to place my name beneath Camille's actions again. When I finally answered my father's next call, he did not ask how I had been. He went straight to the document. He described it as a clarification that would keep investigators from misunderstanding the company's records. He said Camille had made bookkeeping decisions under pressure, and that my background allowed me to explain those decisions properly. "I can't explain work I never performed," I said. There was a short silence, the kind my father used when he believed resistance was temporary. "Your name is already in the files," he replied. "Signing prevents this from becoming worse for everyone." My mother joined the call and softened the threat without removing it. She told me the company supported families, employees, and my parents' retirement. She said Camille was frightened. She said they were finally reaching out after all these years, and I was turning the moment into another punishment. Another. That word told me they still believed the first punishment had been mine to give. I looked back at the declaration. If I signed it, I would be confirming that I had reviewed records I had never seen, approved transfers I had never authorized, and advised people I had not spoken to in 18 years. If I refused, my father had already made the danger clear. My name was inside the files, whether I cooperated or not. But the question that frightened me most was not how my name had appeared there. It was why all three of them had been so certain I would help. Before I explain how a wound from when I was 15 became connected to an adult fraud investigation, I want to invite you into this community. If you believe people should not be forced to carry blame that belongs to someone else, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like this video. It helps these stories reach people who may need the reminder that protecting yourself is not the same as betraying your family. To understand why my hands went cold before I reached the second page of that declaration, we have to go back to Ashford, Ohio, in 2008. To the last week, I still believed my parents would protect the child who had been hurt. I was 15 then. Camille was 17. From the outside, we looked like a close, ordinary family. My father, Martin, believed discipline solved almost anything. He worked hard, paid every bill on time, and treated the order inside our home as evidence that he was doing fatherhood correctly. My mother, Diane, was warmer in public and gentler in private, but only when nothing threatened the picture she needed other people to see. Camille fit that picture better than I did. She was confident where I hesitated, social where I observed, and quick with the kind of answer adults liked. Teachers remembered her. Neighbors praised her. My parents spoke about her future as though it were a family investment that could not be allowed to fail. I was the daughter who noticed things. When Camille came home after curfew, I noticed the mud along the tires of the family car. When she gave one version of a story to Mom and another to Dad, I noticed the words that changed. When my parents decided the easiest way to end an argument was to ask me to apologize, I noticed that too. I just did not yet understand that noticing could make a person dangerous inside a family built on looking away. That autumn, my mother was treasurer for a school booster fundraiser. For several evenings, our dining table disappeared beneath count sheets, deposit slips, and sealed cash envelopes. Camille helped because Mom trusted her with responsibilities she would never have given me. I helped by checking labels and matching the envelope numbers to the handwritten list. The arrangement suited the roles we already had. Camille handled what looked important. I made sure the details were right. The night before everything changed, Mom counted the final collection twice. I sat across from her reading envelope numbers while she marked them on the sheet. Camille moved between the table and kitchen, answering messages on her phone and complaining that the whole process was taking too long. When Mom finished, she placed the deposits inside a zippered bank pouch and told Camille to take it with her the next morning. Camille accepted it without looking up from her phone. Nothing about that moment felt important enough to remember. By the following afternoon, Mom was standing in the kitchen with the bank receipt in one hand and her count sheet in the other. The deposit was short by $1,800. Camille leaned against the counter and said the total must have been wrong from the beginning. Mom looked at me. "Could you have read some of the envelope numbers incorrectly?" she asked. It was not an accusation yet. It was worse in a quieter way. It was an invitation for me to become the easiest explanation. "No," I said. "We checked everyone twice." My father came home while Mom was recounting the remaining paperwork. Camille repeated that the totals had to be wrong. Dad told everyone to stop panicking until he had reviewed it himself. Then he asked why I was being so certain when Camille had been the one trusted with the deposit. I remember thinking the question made no sense. Trust did not change arithmetic. That evening, I went upstairs to return a sweater Camille had left in my room. Her bedroom door was open. I set the sweater on her desk, turned to leave, and saw 3 crumpled fundraiser envelopes beneath the edge of her wastebasket. I recognized the labels because I had read those numbers aloud the night before. Together, they accounted for exactly $1,800. For a few seconds, I stood completely still. Then I heard the front door close downstairs and Camille's footsteps crossing the hall. I picked up the envelopes. She appeared in the doorway before I could put them down. The expression on her face changed the moment she saw what was in my hand. "Give me those," Camille said. She did not sound frightened, not yet. She sounded offended that I had touched something she considered hers. I tightened my hand around the crumpled envelopes. Mom thought I made a mistake, then let her think that until I fix it. That answer removed the last possibility that I had misunderstood what I was holding. Camille stepped into the room and reached for the envelopes. I moved back. She shut the bedroom door behind her, then lowered her voice and told me she had borrowed the money. She had damaged the family car while using it without permission, and she had paid for the repair before Dad could discover what she had done. She said she would replace everything after she found a job. "The deposit already happened," I said. "Mom knows the money is gone. She knows the count is wrong. The count isn't wrong." Her face hardened. "You always have to prove something." I moved toward the door. Camille caught my wrist, but I pulled free and went downstairs. I did not have a plan beyond putting the envelopes in front of my parents. At 15, I still believed proof could end an argument. Camille followed me into the kitchen. "You're going to destroy everything over money I'm putting back," she said. "You already let Mom blame me." She asked a question. "Because you lied." I reached for the wall phone. Camille moved between me and it. A cutting board sat on the counter beside a paring knife my mother had used earlier. Camille grabbed the knife and held it low against her leg. For 1 second, neither of us spoke. I remember the humming refrigerator. I remember the fundraiser envelopes shaking in my hand. I remember thinking that Camille wanted to scare me and that if I backed away, she would learn fear worked better than lying. "Put it down," I said. "Give me the envelopes." I moved toward the doorway instead. Camille stepped in front of me. When I tried to pass, she drove the knife into the left side of my abdomen. There was no accidental struggle, no moment when both our hands were on the handle. She thrust it forward once, deliberately, and then let go, as if the sight of what she had done frightened her more than the act itself. The knife fell to the floor. I looked down and saw blood spreading across my shirt. My knees weakened. I pressed my hand against the wound and slid against the cabinet. Camille kept saying my name. Her voice had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by panic and calculation, fighting for control. Our mother came through the back door less than a minute later. She saw me on the floor, the knife beside me, and Camille standing over us. The envelopes were still clenched in my other hand. Mom called for an ambulance. Then, while we waited, she asked Camille what happened. Camille said I had attacked her over the missing money. She said we struggled and I moved into the knife. Mom looked at the distance between the knife and my body. She looked at the envelopes. She looked at Camille's clean hands and my blood on the cabinet. Then she looked at me. "Why would you corner your sister like that?" she asked. I could not understand the question. I thought shock had made me hear it incorrectly. "She stabbed me," I said. Mom pressed a towel against my side and told me to stop talking until help arrived. My father reached the hospital before I came out of surgery. The wound had missed anything that would have killed me, but it was deep enough to require repair and several days of observation. When I woke properly, Dad sat on one side of the bed and Mom sat on the other. Neither of them began by asking how I felt. Dad said the police would want a statement. He said Camille had admitted taking the fundraiser money to repair the car, but that one terrible decision should not destroy her education and future. He said I had escalated an argument instead of coming to them calmly. "I was coming to you," I said. "You followed her into the kitchen and kept pushing." "She followed me." Mom took my hand. Her voice was soft enough to make what came next feel almost loving. She told me that if I insisted Camille had attacked me intentionally, the police could remove both of us from the home while they investigated. She said officials might decide I was violent too. She said I could end up in foster care with strangers. Then she reminded me that Camille was my sister. They gave me one acceptable version. Camille picked up the knife during a mutual fight. I moved toward her, and the injury happened accidentally. I was 15, medicated, frightened, and dependent on the two people telling me the truth could cost me my home. When the questions came, I repeated their version. I hated myself before I finished saying it. The report described a domestic accident between sisters. The missing fundraiser money was quietly replaced from my parents' savings and attributed to accounting error. Camille lost access to the car for a while. I returned home with stitches, pain medication, and an official story that made my wound sound like something I had helped create. For the first few days, I tried to stay invisible. I ate in my room. I moved carefully because every step pulled at the incision. Camille avoided me, but I could hear my parents comforting her behind her bedroom door. On the 10th evening after the stabbing, Dad called me into the living room. Camille sat beside Mom with her arms folded. Dad said the family could not recover, while I kept treating Camille like a criminal. He wanted me to apologize for accusing her, confronting her, and bringing the police into a private mistake. "She put a knife in me," I said. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "And we protected both of you. Why can't you understand that?" Camille stared at the floor. "Dad said if I kept causing instability, they would look into sending me somewhere equipped to handle troubled teenagers." The threat was delivered calmly, like a practical option under consideration. That was when I understood the truth had not failed because it was weak. My parents had seen enough to know what happened. They had simply chosen the version that protected the daughter they valued more. The next morning, 11 days after Camille stabbed me, I packed clothes, my medication, school papers, and the hospital envelope into a backpack. I left while the house was quiet and called my mother's older sister, Jolene Mercer. Jolene did not tell me to calm down. She did not ask what I had done to provoke anyone. She asked where I was, whether I was safe, and whether my incision had reopened. When she reached me, she took me to have the wound checked. Then she reported my location so no one could claim I had disappeared. She contacted child welfare officials, cooperated with every review, and asked for temporary kinship placement. My parents described my departure as rebellion. They said I had always been difficult, that I had exaggerated the conflict, and that Jolene was encouraging division. But they did not fight hard to bring me home. Doing so would have required a closer examination of why I was afraid to return. Temporary placement became guardianship. Jolene kept the hospital envelope. Inside it were my discharge papers, the accident account I had confirmed, the guardianship documents, and a photograph she took of the healing wound so a doctor could monitor it. She did not treat those items like weapons. She treated them like parts of my medical history that belonged to me. Living with her was the first time I learned that safety could be quiet. There were no loyalty tests at dinner. An apology did not require the harmed person to deny what happened. When Jolene disagreed with me, she explained why. When I woke from nightmares, she did not demand proof that I had earned comfort. I finished school, went through counseling, and built my life in stages. I studied accounting because numbers did not change according to who was most loved. Later, I moved into forensic work and healthcare compliance, where my job was to follow records backward until decisions became visible. People sometimes assumed I chose that career because I liked catching dishonest people. The truth was less dramatic. I wanted to understand how a false statement became official and how an honest person protected herself when someone else controlled the first version of events. By 33, I had a stable career in Columbus, a home that felt like mine, and a relationship with Jolene that no longer revolved around crisis. I had not spoken to Camille, Mom, or Dad in 18 years. I told myself I did not care whether they regretted what happened. That was only partly true. Somewhere beneath my competence, a 15-year-old version of me still imagined a call in which my mother finally said she had known. I imagined my father admitting that protecting Camille had cost him another daughter. I never arranged my life around that fantasy, but I had not completely buried it either. So when an unfamiliar number called and my mother's voice said my name, I did not hang up immediately. She began with my career. She had seen my professional profile and said she was proud of what I had accomplished. She asked about my health. She even asked about Jolene. For several minutes, the conversation sounded like the opening of an apology. Then she said Rowan Home Support was facing questions about its billing records. I knew the company existed. My parents had built it with Camille and marketed it as a family-run service for elderly and disabled clients. Camille handled daily operations and billing. Mom handled office administration and community relationships. Dad controlled ownership and finances. Mom said an unhappy former employee had made allegations that investigators misunderstood. She asked whether I would look at a few documents and explain why the discrepancies did not necessarily prove intent. I can't advise a company I know nothing about, I said. You know us. That's the conflict. She became quiet, then said Dad would send background materials so I could make an informed decision. The calls and emails that followed brought me to the sworn declaration from the beginning of this story. Once my father told me my name was already inside the company's files, I ended the call and stopped treating the request as a family conversation. I preserved every email in its original form. I saved the attachments without editing them. I made a written record of the calls while the wording was fresh. Then I contacted an independent attorney and informed my employer that my identity appeared to have been used in a company under investigation. Only after those protections were in place did I examine the documents more closely. Rowan Home Support's vendor records listed me as an outside compliance consultant. The profile used my full name, social security number, date of birth, professional history, and an old family address. It showed a relationship with the company beginning 4 years earlier. I had never signed a contract. I had never received a call from its compliance staff. I had never logged into its systems, reviewed a claim, or approved a correction. Yet internal forms carried versions of my name beside billing adjustments. A vendor ledger showed payments associated with the false profile. Across 4 years, the amount totaled $86,000. The declaration my parents wanted me to sign would have transformed those payments into compensation for legitimate consulting work. It would also have made me responsible for explaining why the work papers behind that compensation were incomplete or missing. The fraud was not merely near me. They had constructed part of it in my shape. My attorney helped me secure my credit, report the identity misuse, and respond through proper channels. I gave my employer the records necessary to confirm that the work had no connection to my job. I refused to contact company systems or perform an internal review because doing so could compromise both evidence and my independence. When Dad learned I had involved counsel, he called from another number. "You're making this look criminal," he said. "My social security number is attached to work I did not do." "That can be corrected if you cooperate." Correction means removing my name and telling investigators who put it there. He accused me of using professional language to avoid a family responsibility. He said the company paid salaries, supported clients, and funded the retirement he and Mom had spent decades earning. One signature, he insisted, could prevent a misunderstanding from destroying all of it. Mom's pressure was different. Her messages moved between affection and grief. She said Camille was terrified. She said prison would ruin her. She said our family had already lost 18 years because I ran away and asked whether I truly wanted to lose the rest. Camille waited longer to contact me. When she finally did, she skipped the emotional appeal. She said the outside consultant profile had been created to satisfy independence requirements. She claimed the billing problems were the result of staffing shortages, software errors, and employees who entered visits late. She said the money attached to my name had never been meant for me. My credentials had simply made the review structure look complete while she repaired the paperwork. "You used my identity to make false records look independent," I said. "I used something the family already had." That sentence carried the entire system inside it. My identity, my career, and my credibility were family property to her. She had not contacted me before using them because she believed permission could be obtained afterward through pressure. Then she told me refusing would not protect me. If investigators saw my name and credentials without an explanation, they could assume I had taken the money. She presented her proposed lie as the only thing standing between me and prosecution. At 15, the threat had been foster care. At 33, it was prison and professional ruin. The method had not changed. Over the next several weeks, I learned what had brought investigators to Rowan Home Support before my parents ever called me. Leah Ortiz, the company's billing manager, had noticed visit records that did not match caregiver schedules. Some caregivers appeared to work overlapping shifts in distant locations. Hours were added after supervisors had approved timesheets. Client signatures repeated in ways that did not look natural. Leah raised the discrepancies internally. Camille described them as ordinary cleanup caused by rapid growth. When Leah continued asking for source records, her access was reduced. Diane documented her as uncooperative, and Camille eventually terminated her. Leah had preserved the records and notes she was legally entitled to retain. She filed a protected report before I was contacted, which meant the investigation did not begin with me and did not depend on anyone believing my family history. The records revealed one connected scheme. Camille created ghost caregiver profiles and billed for visits that never occurred. She inflated hours on legitimate client accounts and used copied electronic signatures to support the changes. Money moved through payroll and vendor channels she controlled. The fictitious profile bearing my name provided the appearance of an independent reviewer whenever large adjustments needed approval. The $86,000 attributed to me did not reach me. The related payment channel led back to accounts Camille controlled. My parents had not designed every part of the scheme. That did not make them innocent. Dad approved transfers after questions had already been raised. He accepted Camille's explanations because the company's growth supported his finances and public standing. Mom helped isolate Leah and treated accurate billing concerns as an attack on the family. Once the preservation demand arrived, both of them learned enough to understand that Camille's records could not support an innocent error explanation. That was when they chose me. They needed someone with genuine compliance credentials to sign the backdated reviews. They needed the payments in my name to look real. Most of all, they needed a person they already knew how to frighten into carrying Camille's responsibility. I called Jolene and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. The next day, she brought me the old hospital envelope. We opened it at my kitchen table. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges. My discharge summary described the depth and location of the wound in clinical language. The incident report called it an accidental injury during a conflict between siblings. Beneath the short statement was the signature I had written while medicated and afraid. Jolene placed the photograph beside it. I saw the 15-year-old version of my body, bruised around the bandage, healing from a truth my family had renamed. Then I placed the new affidavit beside the old statement. The documents were separated by 18 years, different institutions, and different stakes. But both required the same thing, my name beneath a version that protected Camille by making my own harm look voluntary. For years, I had believed my career was the opposite of my childhood. I worked with evidence because evidence could not be guilted or shamed. Now I understood why my family had chosen that career as their weapon. My credentials made the lie more valuable. The realization hurt, but it also made the decision simple. With my attorney, I prepared a truthful declaration. I stated that I had never worked for Rowan Home Support, never authorized use of my identity, never reviewed its billing, never controlled the payment channel, and never received the $86,000 attributed to me. I identified the documents my family had sent and the statements they wanted me to confirm. Before signing, I read every line twice. No one sat beside me explaining what would happen if I told the truth. No one held my housing, safety, or belonging over my head. I signed my name, then I submitted the declaration and the preserved communications through counsel. The family's reaction came quickly. Dad wrote that I had destroyed a business that supported vulnerable people. He said he had spent 18 years hoping I would mature enough to understand what family required. Mom left a message saying Camille might lose her freedom because I refused to show mercy. She cried as she said I had run away from them once and was abandoning them again. Camille's messages were colder. She said investigators would still see my name. She claimed Leah was angry, the records were incomplete, and I had just created a conflict that made everyone look guilty. She warned that if she went down, the files could pull me with her. I did not argue with any of them. I gave every new message to my attorney and preserved it with the others. My cooperation with investigators was less dramatic than my family imagined. There was no secret meeting where I produced one perfect piece of evidence. I answered questions. I supplied employment and tax records. My employer confirmed where I had worked. Access logs showed that I had never entered Rowan Home Support systems. Bank records showed I did not control the account associated with the false vendor profile and never received its money. The strongest part of the case was not my statement. It was the way independent records agreed. Leah's chronology matched claim changes stored by outside systems. Caregiver schedules contradicted billed visits. Bank transfers followed paths Camille could access. The vendor profile using my identity had been created from within the company. Emails showed my parents discussing how my credentials could support a corrected explanation after the investigation had already begun. Then Camille made the mistake that removed much of the remaining doubt. After the company received a preservation demand, she attempted to delete and relabel selected files. Diane used her administrative access to alter dates on supporting records. They treated digital systems like the old hospital room, assuming the person with authority could replace the first account with a cleaner one. But deletion created logs, altered files retained histories. Backdated records did not match external timestamps. Their effort to erase intent became evidence of intent. The investigation moved beyond whether Rowan Home Support had made billing mistakes. It focused on who created the false claims, who controlled the money, who retaliated against Leah, who used my identity, and who tried to reconstruct records after preservation became mandatory. For months, I lived between two realities. In one, I was a professional responding to a documented identity crime. In the other, I was 15 again, waiting for adults to decide whether the official version would make me guilty. The difference was that I no longer waited alone. Jolene checked on me without taking over. My employer followed the evidence instead of the accusation. My attorney answered threats with process. Leah's records existed independently of my memories. Every time fear told me my family might still control the outcome, another verifiable fact reminded me they did not control everything anymore. Eventually, investigators confirmed in writing that I was a victim of identity misuse, not a participant in the scheme. My compromised records were corrected. My professional standing remained intact. I read the confirmation 3 times. Relief did not arrive as celebration. My hands shook. I sat at my desk and cried with the document in front of me because some part of me had spent 18 years waiting for an official record to say what my parents never would. This was not mine. Once I was cleared, the remaining consequences unfolded. From conduct, the Rowans could no longer explain away. Camille pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud, identity-related offenses, and obstruction. She received a custodial sentence, restitution obligations, and exclusion from future work involving publicly funded healthcare programs. The sentence did not come because I refused to help her. It came from 4 years of false claims, misuse of identities, diverted money, retaliation, and destruction of records. Dad was held responsible for approving suspect transfers and participating in the attempted cover story after he understood the investigation. Mom faced consequences for retaliating against Leah and altering administrative records. Their legal outcomes were less severe than Camille's because their proven conduct was narrower, but both carried sanctions and financial liability. Rowan Home Support lost its provider status. The company closed, and available assets were liquidated toward restitution and lawful claims. The public image my parents had protected since I was 15 disappeared under records they could not control. Leah was formally cleared of wrongdoing, and her retaliation claim was resolved through the proper process. We never became instant friends or turned the case into a shared crusade. We spoke enough to recognize what each of us had survived. Camille had selected both of us to carry responsibility for records we refused to falsify. I received no money from the company and wanted none. There was no inheritance hidden behind the case, no triumphant takeover, and no reward large enough to make the experience feel worthwhile. What I received was my name back. Before Camille's sentencing was complete, my parents requested a private family meeting through their attorney. They wanted to discuss what they called the damage to our relationships outside the legal process. For one night, I considered it. Not because I believed they had changed, but because the old hope was still alive enough to ask whether this might be the moment they finally admitted what they had done. Then Dad sent a message accusing me of refusing reconciliation unless everyone accepted my version. Mom wrote that she could forgive my cooperation if I acknowledged I had acted from childhood resentment. They were still offering the same bargain, access to the family in exchange for surrendering the truth. I declined the meeting. Through counsel, I stated that I would not participate in private negotiations and wanted no direct contact from Camille, Mom, or Dad. When the legal matters concluded, I made the boundary permanent. Ending contact did not feel powerful at first. It felt like another loss. I had spent years believing the most painful part of leaving at 15 was that my parents did not come after me. At 33, I understood the deeper pain. They had always known how to reach me. They contacted me the moment my usefulness outweighed their pride. That understanding required grief. Jolene did not tell me I should be happy justice had been done. She sat with me through the weeks when relief and sadness arrived together. Sometimes we discussed the case. Sometimes we talked about ordinary things. Her care remained what it had always been, consistent, practical, and free of conditions. One evening, after the final documents were complete, I opened the hospital envelope again. I did not need it for court. The childhood stabbing had not been retried, and no adult verdict could rewrite what happened in that kitchen. The envelope belonged to a different kind of resolution. I placed 3 documents on the table: the statement I had confirmed at 15, the false affidavit my parents wanted me to sign at 33, and the truthful declaration I had submitted instead. The first carried my name under coercion. The second remained unsigned. The third carried the same name written by a woman who understood exactly what it meant. For years, I had hidden the scar beneath clothing without consciously deciding to. That night, it was visible above the waistband of my clothes as I sat at the table. I touched the raised line lightly and looked at the signature on the truthful declaration. The scar was mine, the name was mine, and at last, neither belonged to their story.